Good morning, everybody, and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today, we are taking a look at Death's Wind Revised. Now, I released this video earlier this week on Monday, and have gone through and changed it in a more drastic way than I would have expected. So, the changes I made was I made it a Argonian instead of a Nord. A Nord still works. Argonian just has easier resource management than any other race when it comes to tanking. And that's kind of what a lot of people look for at the end game, at the trial level. Not necessarily dungeon level, but trial level, definitely. But here we go. We got 15 into magic, a 15 into health, 34 into stamina. As you can see, we have a 22k magic, a 40k health, 23k stamina. All these pools are really good for this. We do have a 1400 spell damage, 29% spell crit. This is actually going to go up to 39 when we buff up completely. Just so you guys can see, 39%. It doesn't matter what bar we're on, it's still going to go to 39%. And you can see our resistances are pretty good. Like this, but when we buff up, again, 28, 28, and then on the back bar, 27, 27. And that's because we don't have as many ice abilities on the back bar. So going down here, we are using the Lady Monostone. We do have minor heroism at all times because of our set, one of our sets we're wearing. And we do have tri-stat food. So going over here, we're going to take a look at that tri-stat food. We are using Longfin and Pasty. Melon sauce. This stuff is just super awesome. Any tri-stat food you can use on a tank is going to be more beneficial to them than most other builds, especially if you're trying to make a hybrid character. Do not use this food. There's another food you can get that gives you max magicka, max stamina, a lot better than using this. So going over the sets, we are using the onto this real quick. Potions. Make sure that you're using healthy pots. It's a thing that you can get on live that gives you 9,000 health, 7,000 magicka, 7,000 stamina. That's the best pots you can use on a tank, especially an Argonian tank. Now going over the sets, we are using an Ice Heart monster set. The monster set, that's why we have such high crit, is this monster set procs off of critical damage, and it has a 20% chance of proccing. But if you have a lot of dots going off, it will activate quite often. So you don't really need to cast a shield. This will do it for you. It is random, but if you keep your ice abilities up enough, it will stay active a lot. So the next set is Shulks, and Shulks is a really good set for magicka type tanks because it gives max health, spell damage, spell crit, but it also grants minor heroism at all times. So you don't need to use like Heroic Slash, and you can actually use this set with like an Ice Staff tank if you want to. Moving on, the other set we're using is a 5-piece Plague Doctors, and we're using this because of all the health it gives. And I didn't want to release this build using Ebon, even though it is something you can use with this build. But Plague Doctors is going to put you in this range where you get these stat pools a lot better than you do with Ebon. On the Ebon, you have like a 21k stamina and like a 20k, barely 20k magicka. With this, you get a 22k magicka, 23k stamina, so it's a lot better off in the long run. We are running, on this, we are running one infused helm, infused legs, and the shield is infused. Both shields are infused on this for the higher stat pools. The chest we're using is reinforced. The smaller pieces are all sturdy. And then on the jewelry, we're using 2 tri-rune and 1 infused. Now, we're using the infused, and I keep forgetting to change that because somebody pointed out to me that I was actually using the wrong enchant here. So the one you want is the speed enchant. You want this one to make the cooldown faster on the pot. This way it takes the potion's cooldown to 37 seconds. So you can keep this up every 37 seconds. It's a more balanced effect than having like all 3 of these. Because with this, you still can get stats, and you can still use 2 shield play. So it still gives you that greater benefit. On the swords, we're using 2 infused with Crusher enchants. This is advised for in-game, for more of the in-game play using infused with Crusher. So, moving on though, to the skills. On the skills, just make sure you get all your all your class passives. You will need them for certain effects, possibly in certain situations, things like that, and you can swap out some skills at some times. Moving on to the sword and board, make sure you get all the passives for it. Armor, you want the light armor passives, the top 3. Medium armor, you want the top 2 and the bottom 1. Heavy armor, you want to get them all. There is a reason why you want these guys. Like this one does increase your magic recovery, even though you're not using it really. It's still good to have, because anything you can do to benefit your character in any way, shape, or form is going to be good for them, even if it's a minor increase. The same thing with this. This just reduces the magicka cost of abilities by 2%. And this gives you magic resistance. With medium armor, this reduces, or gives you a little bit of weapon crit. You don't really need it, but it's still good to have. Just like this is good to have for the stamina recovery and the stamina cost, and this is good to have for the dodge roll. And then moving on to heavy armor, you want all the passives because these are going to be beneficial to you for being in heavy armor. Moving on to world skills, you can be a vampire with this build. I've tested it, but honestly, with it and without it, I didn't notice a difference. So, soul magic, yeah, if you want those 2 things. Fighter's Guild, just make sure that you have Banish the Wicked. I was testing some other ideas with this build before I turn it into this. So, Mage's Guild, make sure you get Magicka Controller. Sejic Order, this is going to be the one that you're going to want the points in. You're going to want Concentrated Barrier and Deliberation with Deep Thoughts. Deep Thoughts is an instant cast and it costs you nothing. So it's a really good resource management ability. It's like the best one a tank can get this update, because this, along with Deliberation, gives you 30% damage reduction while that's active. So it's like you can cast it and just stand there, get hit unless something interrupts you. You can stand there all day in that. Concentrated Barrier, you have this so that when you have this on your front bar, you get a small damage shield, which helps you mitigate damage. Undaunted, you want the Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. Moving on to the racials, make sure you get all your Argonian racials for this. Argonian is, for this particular build, one of the better choices. The second best choice for this is Breton. The third best is going to be High Elf. Actually, High Elf would probably be second. Third best would be Breton, and then the fourth will be Dark Elf. It is good to play the other races that have health benefits, but at the same time, like a Nord, an Orc, whatever, it's because of how this build works. You want that, you want to get that greater benefit that those magic races can give you. And Argonian does get 3% max magicka, but it's the potion thing that makes him so good. In Alchemy, you want to make sure you get medicinal use, and then provisioning, gourmand, and connoisseur. So that is that. Now we're going to go to the skills on the bar. And you guys are going to notice something. I have no heroic slash, no deep slash. I just have the sword and board taunt. That is the only sword and board skill I'm using. But that's okay, because I can still apply minor maim. So Pierce Armor is our main ability on our bar that we're using. This is going to apply taunt. This is going to apply major fracture, major breach. It does a little bit of damage, but you're not going to be too worried about it. You're just using it for the major breach, major fracture, and the taunt. The next ability we have is Arctic Blast. Now, a lot of people like to use Polar Winds because it heals them and somebody else. But here's the problem with Polar Winds. Polar Winds doesn't apply chilled. With this particular build, Arctic Blast is best because it has a chance of proccing chilled on the enemies because it is a frost ability. Now, this in combination with gripping shards will apply chilled and also has a chance of immobilize. Even though chilled can't, or gripping shards does immobilize the enemies, it also has a chance of applying it again when you have both of these active. Because you can apply chilled with this ability, which applies minor maim, and this one will apply immobilize, plus it has a chance of immobilizing again. Immobilize does have an immunity to it, but chilled does not. And when you have chilled applied to the enemy, guess what that does? Minor maim. And it lasts for 4 seconds. And it can be constantly reapplied. So this is how we keep our minor maim applied to the enemies, is with these two abilities. This is also an AoE, and so is this. And both of these have, this one has a 10 meter radius, and this has a 6 meter radius. So this one actually reaches out past this. Because I'll show you what I mean by the 10 meter radius. So if I cast this, watch how big the pop is off of it. Now watch how big this area of effect is. It's almost about the same size, but the blast from the other one goes out just a little bit further. So the Arctic Blast does reach out a little bit further than this. So, but like I said, in combination with the two, you can keep this up pretty substantial with this build, and you shouldn't have any major resource loss. The next ability we have on our bar is Shimmering Shield. You're going to be keeping this up quite a bit as well, and this is basically absorbs 3 projectiles, any projectile. So arrows, spells, things like that, and it will absorb them. And every time it absorbs them, it gives you 595 magicka and grants you minor hero or major heroism. So not only do you get 1 ultimate regeneration every 1.5 seconds, you're getting another 3 on top of that. So make sure ultimate gen really fast. But if there's no ranged enemies, you won't be using it too often. The next ability we have here is Deep Thoughts. And we have this here for the shield and the deliberation, but also to gain resources back if you're having resource issues. Because of the way this build's set up, you get a lot of damage reduction. So it's really good. The next ability we have is Northern Storm, and we have Northern Storm for the CC it has, which it applies a movement speed debuff for 8 seconds. It also grants you and your allies standing within the circle 30% damage reduction, and while slotted you get 8% max magicka. Onto the back bar. On the back bar we have Frozen Device. This is going to be like your pull. This is how you're going to get enemies brought to you and stuff like that. As you can see, a lot of the abilities you use are magicka based. And I was asked why I'm not using things like with a lot of magic recovery for it. And honestly, you don't need it. Like, if you're using this build properly, you will never need that. Moving on, but this can pull enemies. And you can have 3 of these down at any given time. So you can place them in any combination you want. Just like that. And then, like, enemies will walk through it. And guess what? They get pulled to you. No matter where you are, even if you move, they will get pulled to your destination of where you're standing. The next ability we have is Lotus Blossom. Now, Lotus Blossom is probably the best heal that a Warden has for group support and for themselves. This thing will heal for 1,597 health on a light attack, on heavy attacks 4,791. But because we are Argonian, we get 5% healing done on top of that, and we get a lot of healing done, but we also get a lot of healing received. So a lot of these heals hit us a lot better. And that's the main reason why we have it, is we want it to heal not only us, but also possibly our allies if they need it. The next ability we have is Blue Betty. This is our magic recovery thing, and it does give us major sorcery. It's not needed because it doesn't buff our damage of our abilities. So you guys can see right here, I'm going to show you on the front bar. The damage of this is 2,165. The damage of this is 1,082. These are both based off of max health, the damages. And to prove it, I'm going to go ahead and buff up with the other ability. So here's the Betty Netch. This gives us 20 sorcery. You can see the spell damage went to 1759 or 56. And going in here and looking at the skills, they didn't change because they're based off of max health. Now, To prove they're based off of max health, I'm going to throw myself off of a cliff, take some falling damage, and heal myself, and get my thing to buff my health up 3%. And you'll see now they do more damage because they're based off of max health. The higher the health, the stronger these things hit for. So, not even Magicka raises them, guys. Only health, and that's it. Oops. Back bar. So we have this here mainly for the magic recovery. Because we do go through a lot of Magicka with this build, we want that magic recovery coming in constantly. It costs nothing, so it saves you resources, and it's instant cast, and it's 27 seconds long. It's really good. The next ability we have is Ice Fortress. This is a very powerful ability for us because not only does it give us major resolve and major ward, which reduces or increases our physical and spell resistance, it is also grants us minor protection. With the way this build's particularly set up, we end up with 50% damage reduction when we have Northern Storm or we are using Meditate. So we get our resistances, which mitigates almost 50% of the damage, along with another 50% mitigation on the leftover damage. So initial hits get reduced by 50%, leftover hits get reduced by another 50%, reducing the damage in total by 75%. So 75% of the incoming damage is mitigated. And that's what makes this build so powerful in its own right, is it can mitigate a lot of damage. The next ability we have on our bar is Inner Light. We only have this here for the 5% max Magicka, because when we swap bars, we don't want to lose too much Magicka, so we have Inner Light here. The last ability we have on our bar is Aggressive Warhorn. This is here for granting our group max Magicka, max Stamina, and minor Toughness by 10%, and then granting the rest of the DPS Major Force, increasing their critical damage done by 15%. Now, moving on to the CP, and I'm going to start with the blue tree this time. I changed this a lot. I do want to say this about the last one. Do not put into Thaumaturge on this build. I was using an Ice Staff with this build, and Thaumaturge does affect the Ice Staff damage over time, but that's it. So don't worry about putting the Thaumaturge on this build. It doesn't need it. So instead I put 76 in a Bless, increasing our healing done by 14%. With being an Argonian, we have a 90% healing done. That's almost 20%. That's more than enough. If an enemy drops below 50% health, the Warden actually gets accelerated growth. When you heal an ally under 40% health and green with a green balance ability, which is going to be Lotus Blossom, you gain Major Mending, increasing your healing done by 25% for 3 seconds. This actually can happen quite a bit. On top of that, you also get Nature's Gift. So anytime that you heal somebody with this, you also get Magicka back and stamina, whichever resource pool is lower. So it'll give me stamina back, because my resource pool for Magicka is lower than my stamina. That's why we have this kind of swapped out thing here. This will give me my Magicka, this can give me stamina. And then we have Emerald Moss, increases healing done, but it's only on the back bar. And then of course we have Maturation. When you heal yourself or an ally, you grant the target minor toughness, increasing their max health by 10% for 10 seconds. This will be up all the time. With this and Warhorn, it's up 100% of the time on you constantly. So it's the trade-off is really good here on that. The next thing we did was we put 66 in the Elfborn, increasing our critical heals by 22% and our critical damage. With those two Frost abilities, any critical damage they do is boosted. So it does help to have them boosted up. Next, we have 66 into Elemental Expert. This gives us a 13% increase in our Frost damage. We have 2 into Spell Erosion because we didn't really have any place to put the points. And then we put 40 into Mastered Arms. This increases our direct damage done by 16%, but we put it here to get Reposit. where Posit redirects damage back to the enemies anytime we block their attack. So now that I've shown you the blue tree, we're going to go ahead and go on to the red tree and finish this off. 56 in Ironclad, this reduces damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. 23 into Thick Skin, this reduces incoming damage from damage over time effects by 10%. And this is poison, bleed, flame, fire, like burning, concussed, chilled, that kind of stuff. There is other effects that can be reduced by this, but those are the main ones. The next thing we have is 56 in a Hardy and Elemental Defender. As you can see, these both give us 12% damage reduction to any source of damage. So this is all magic damage, this is all physical type damage. This is where that 8% minor protection from our Ice Fortress will be applied. So that takes it up to a 20%. And then on top of that, any other damage reduction we have gets applied on top of that extra. So we get an extra 30%, that's a 50%. And then any light or direct damage attacks are going to be reduced by a total of 70% damage. So that 75% jumps to an 80% damage mitigation. Almost. It's somewhere, it's like 79.5% damage reduction. Moving on over here, we have 40 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. This is a good balance, guys. I usually like to put 56 in here for that 20% increase, but 40 lets me spread my points out a little bit better and gives a little bit better effect. Moving on to Quick Recovery, we have 19. This increases healing received by 5%. For Argonians, this is great, but if I was playing another race, I wouldn't even worry about this. Because unless you're an orc, and then I would put it in here. But if I was playing something else, I would probably take these 19 points and see about spreading them into something else, maybe Spell Shield and Heavy Armor Focus or something, because you really don't need this. You're not going to get that much healing. I mean, you could still put it here because, I mean, it'll benefit you, but it's not as effective as it is on the Argonian. Moving on, 56 in the Warlord. This reduces break free cost by 20%. 23 in a bashing focus, reducing bash cost by 14%. And this does work with the reduced bashing cost from the shield play. So we actually get our bash is like 600. It's super small. And then we have 2 into Sprinter. Moving on, we have 76 into Tenacity on this build. We need that resource return a little bit better on this build because we do a lot of heavy attacks. So we want that greater resource return. Moving on over here, we have 56 in the Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 20%, and 37 into Tumbling, reducing our dodge roll cost by 15%. We could take this up to 17%, but the 2% you don't really notice. But you do notice the 4% from the medium armor. So this is actually 19%. Moving on, Shadow Ward. Yeah, we already went over that. And then we've already been over the blue tree. So that's it for that. I'm going to go ahead and take this build over to the Maw of Lorkesh, just to show you guys how well it can mitigate damage and everything like that. I did get a chance to actually play this with the Nord setup in a dungeon, and I will say for dungeon play, this build is awesome. Like, amazing. In trial play, you might want to change out, like, the gripping shards with just put Arctic Blast there and then put a Heroic Slash on the front bar, or swap Heroic Slash to the back bar somewhere. Maybe drop something off the back bar, not Inner Light, but drop something else off the back bar to give you resource, you know, to give you the Heroic Slash so you have that. Or not Heroic Slash, but Deep Slash, so you have that Minor Maim capability. Because then you'll have 100% uptime of Minor Maim no matter what. Because Heroic Slash and all this ice damage will help. But because we have Shimmering Shield and Deep Thoughts on the front bar, we have no room for it. So, you're solely playing off the chances of proccing Chilled. So here comes the enemies. Let's see how many spellcasters we have. We have 1, which is going to be perfect. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab that healer or that spellcaster and bring him to us. We're going to buff up. And as you can see, we're already starting to take damage. Now we're going to do our Shimmering Shield, our Arctic Winds, and then our Gripping Shards. Now, if you notice, all the enemies became whatever. But you can see Chilled on the side popping down. All these enemies pretty much have minor maim on them because of the Gripping Shards and this. And this is what you're going to be doing most of the time. If you are having resource issues, though, you can pop a potion. But anytime you see your Frost Cloak go off, you're going to want to, not your Frost Cloak, your Ice Heart go off. You are going to want to do some heavy attacks. And you can tell when Frost Cloak goes off because you'll hear this, like, popping sound. So you can do some heavy attacks to get resources back. But you won't be going through that much magicka usually with this build. And if you get into a really bad situation to where you need stuff, do your Northern Storm. Don't be afraid to use it, just use it. Look at this, I can stand there with Northern Storm active, and these guys are barely hurting me. Now if I need to use Deep Thoughts, as I said, these guys can't even really hurt me that much. And if I pop my Frost Cloak, and then I go into that, now these guys aren't hurting me hardly at all because I have my 8% damage reduction and the 30%, making it a 50% total. So it's these guys can't do enough damage to me. Let's go ahead and get rid of them. And there you go. As you guys saw there, though, that's how this build works. It plays off of Ice Shards, Gripping Shards, and Arctic Blast to basically keep minor maim applied to your targets, which reduces their damage by 15%. All their damage. Magic doesn't matter. All damage is reduced by 15%. And on top of that, you get this really nice tick heal from Arctic Blast. As you can see, it hits for 11,000 and it ticks for 1,900, 1,100, 11 or whatever, you know, and that's a lot of health coming in. But when you have this along with this and you're doing a lot of light attacks, you can pretty much keep yourself alive almost indefinitely. With this applied and this applied, you shouldn't have a lot of resource issues, but you want to try and keep that, you know, swap to the back bar as much as you can to keep these two active, so you can use these other abilities like Gripping Shards and all that, because that costs magicka. And you want that Betty Netch bringing in that magic return so you can keep these abilities active along with your Frost Cloak and everything else. So, but that's pretty much how the build works. I did do a lot of showing off of this build during the live stream of the Morning Cup. I cleared all 3 of these ads as well. I think I cleared all 3. Well, I know I killed 2 of them, or 1 of them, and I had the other 2 left, and I just let myself die or something because of how long it was taking. Because these guys do have 1 million health. On the veteran mode, these guys have like 3 million health, so, or 2 million. It's ridiculous. But yes, this is a very survivable tank, and it's a very powerful tank. But that's it for the Death's Wind, guys. I hope you guys like the Death's Wind. I have had a blast playing this build. This is by far, out of all the tank builds I've released, my favorite. And like I said, I did get to play it through a dungeon. I played it through Scale Caller, and I had no problems running this build. And my group had no problems with like ads or trash or anything. Like the damage was so minimal because of all the AoE minor main going out. It just worked. So, but that's it for the Death's Wind build. If you guys like this build, again, you can hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, or other builds by me, you can hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.